I was sitting cross-legged in the middle of a scorched salt flat in Bolivia, under the blazing sun, with nothing but a jug of water and a single question written in my journal. What do I really want? No food, no distractions, no phone, no goals, no one to impress. Just me, my mind, and the relentless silence of the earth. For the first few hours, I thought I was meditating. But by day 2, I realized something else was happening. Beneath the surface of stillness, something darker began to rise. A gnawing, clawing sensation, not physical hunger, but psychological hunger, desire. And it wasn't beautiful. It wasn't inspiring. It was desperate. It felt like being chased by a shadow that never got tired. That's when I remembered something I had once read by Schopenhauer, the philosopher who saw further into the suffering of the human condition than almost anyone else. All willing arises from lack. And suddenly it clicked. Desire isn't some divine compass pointing us toward our purpose. It's pain, camouflaged, romanticized, marketed. But it's pain nonetheless. And the more I sat with it, the more I realized that the very structure of desire is built on a foundation of suffering. Because to desire is to feel that something is not yet, that something is missing, that something is wrong with this moment. And so we chase. We chase money, status, followers, love, attention, enlightenment, even spiritual growth. But beneath every chase is the same feeling, lack. And this is what Schopenhauer discovered, and what most of us spend our entire lives trying to avoid. That desire is not the path to happiness. It is the very engine of our suffering. And yet we worship it. We build our lives around it. We define ourselves by it. But have you ever stopped to ask, where do my desires actually come from? Are they mine, or are they inherited, programmed, sold to me?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Schopenhauer's philosophy is brutal. It doesn't coddle. It doesn't give you easy answers. It tears through your illusions like fire through dry grass. He says essentially that the will to live, this fundamental force within all beings to survive, to reproduce, to continue, is blind, irrational, and unstoppable. And because of that, we are never truly at peace. Because the moment one desire is fulfilled, another takes its place. You get the job. Now you want the promotion. You get the relationship. Now you want the ring. You reach a goal. Now you want the next one. And the cycle never ends. Schopenhauer looked at this and concluded, life is suffering, not because of what happens to us, but because of the very nature of wanting. And the more conscious you become, the more painful that realization is, because you begin to see that even your noblest dreams, even your highest aspirations, are tinged with craving. And craving is always based on the illusion that this moment is not enough. Think about that. How often do you feel like you can finally relax when you get what you want? Maybe for a few minutes. Maybe for a day. And then the itch returns. The feeling of lack reappears. And we call it ambition or drive or motivation. But what if it's just another mask for suffering? What if the very thing we think is making us powerful, success-oriented beings is actually chaining us to a wheel of endless dissatisfaction? That's what Schopenhauer meant when he said, pleasure is never as pleasant as we expected it to be. and pain is always more painful. Because desire distorts reality. It projects a fantasy onto the future and robs us of the present. And when you finally get the thing you wanted, it almost always feels underwhelming. Why? Because what you were really craving wasn't the thing. You were craving the end of craving. This is the painful truth that no one wants to hear. That your dream life, your dream relationship, your dream body, your dream career, none of it will silence the hunger. Because the hunger isn't external. It's internal. It's the structure of your own mind. So ask yourself, what happens when you stop chasing? Who are you without your desires? Without your goals? Without your image? Most people can't answer that. Because we've built our identities entirely around what we want. I'm someone who's going to be successful. I'm someone who's going to change the world. I'm someone who's going to be remembered. But Schopenhauer forces us to confront the terrifying possibility that all of these identities are just echoes of the will, this blind, relentless force that uses us to perpetuate itself. And that true peace doesn't come from fulfilling desire. It comes from transcending it. This is where the spiritual dimension of Schopenhauer's work begins to emerge. Because unlike some philosophers who leave you in despair, Schopenhauer pointed to a way out. And it wasn't through achieving more. It was through negation, through stillness, through renunciation. He was deeply influenced by Buddhism and Vedanta, the ancient traditions that saw desire as the root of suffering and silence as the door to liberation. He believed that true freedom comes not from satisfying the will, but from silencing it, from stepping outside the chase, from witnessing the hunger without feeding it. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming free. Free to act without being pulled by compulsive craving. Free to love without clinging. Free to live without needing every moment to fulfill your fantasy of how life should be. I remember the third day on the salt flat. The sun was rising, and the world was completely still. My mind had gone quiet not because I forced it, but because I had finally stopped trying to get somewhere. There was nowhere to go, nothing to achieve, nothing to become. And in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the peace of success, not the peace of accomplishment, but the peace of enoughness. That this breath, this sky, this moment was enough. And in that stillness I saw something that changed me forever. Desire isn't the source of your power. It's the veil over your power. And the moment you stop identifying with it, something deeper awakens. An intelligence, a presence, a kind of quiet knowing that doesn't need anything to be complete. But here's the paradox. The ego doesn't want that kind of peace, because the ego is made of wanting. It needs problems to fix, mountains to climb, people to impress. That's how it survives. So when you start to disidentify from desire, the ego panics. It tells you you're becoming lazy, directionless, boring. But that's just fear talking. Because what actually happens when you stop chasing is this: you start seeing. You start noticing the miracle of the moment, the subtle depth of a breeze on your skin, the way the sunlight moves, the silence between your thoughts. And in that space, you don't lose yourself. you find yourself not as a character in a story, but as awareness itself, still, silent, whole. So the real question is not what do I want? The real question is, what am I without want? What remains when the mind stops reaching? What shines through when the clouds of craving part? That's where the real journey begins. Not outward, but inward. Toward the silence beneath the will, toward the space where desire dissolves and all that remains is presence. That's the secret Schopenhauer discovered. And it's not an easy path, but it's the only one that leads to peace. Not the peace of achievement, but the peace of awakening. And now I want to ask you something that could change your life. What if you never needed to get what you want in order to be free? What if the very thing you've been seeking is already here, waiting for you to stop seeking? We're taught to believe that desire is life, that wanting is vitality, that to stop wanting is to die inside. But this is the great illusion one Schopenhauer pulled the curtain back on with terrifying clarity. Because when we say, I want to live fully, we often mean, I want to get what I want. And when we don't get it, we suffer. But even when we do get it, we suffer again. Why? Because desire is a thirst that cannot be quenched. It doesn't end when fulfilled. It mutates. It moves the goalpost. It whispers more, better, next. And so we spend our lives running toward a finish line that doesn't exist. And the tragedy is we call that progress. Schopenhauer looked at the human condition and saw something that changed how I see everything, that the more intensely we desire, the more tightly we are bound to suffering. And the more we identify with that desire, the more we lose ourselves. Because desire is not neutral. It's not just a preference. It's a force, a compulsion, a current that sweeps us away from presence into projection, into imagining a future where everything is finally right. But what if that future never comes? What if the idea that peace lies after is the very thing keeping us from peace now? These are not just philosophical puzzles. These are spiritual emergencies. Because if you look closely, you'll see that almost every form of anxiety, depression, and burnout in modern life can be traced back to this one core structure. I am not enough unless I get what I want. And that want could be anything: success, love, enlightenment, validation. But the structure is always the same: a self contracted around a lack, a self defined by what it doesn't have. And so we live in a state of constant tension. That's what Schopenhauer called the pendulum of human life, swinging between pain and boredom. Pain when we don't have, boredom when we do. And somehow we're supposed to believe that this is normal. But what if the problem isn't life? What if the problem is the lens we're looking through? What if peace isn't found by satisfying desire, but by dissolving the illusion that desire is who we are? That was Schopenhauer's painful discovery. And yet it opens the door to something beautiful. Because once you see the trap, once you really see it not just intellectually, but experientially, you begin to taste a deeper freedom. A freedom that doesn't depend on outcomes. A freedom that doesn't fluctuate with success or failure. A freedom that lives in the space between thoughts, between cravings, between moments. And that freedom is not found in the will. It's found beyond the will. So how do we get there? We don't. That's the paradox. You can't will yourself beyond the will. You can't desire your way out of desire. The more you try, the deeper you fall into the trap. So the only way forward is to stop, and to pause, to observe, to sit in the fire of craving without feeding it, to feel the ache of want and let it burn out on its own. This is what the mystics called surrender, not giving up, but giving in to the truth that you are not the one in control, that the will is not your master, that behind the noise of desire, there is a silence that is not lacking anything. And in that silence, you are already whole. This is not easy. It's not glamorous. It doesn't look good on Instagram. It's quiet. It's raw. It's humbling. But it's real. And the more you practice it, the more you begin to see desire for what it is, a wave, a pattern, a movement of the mind, and like all waves, it rises and falls. You don't have to obey it. You don't have to follow it. You can watch it like clouds passing through the sky. And in that watching, you become something else, not the one who wants, but the one who sees. This is what Schopenhauer touched when he spoke of denial of the will, the state where the ego dissolves, where the compulsion to chase disappears, where the world is no longer filtered through lack, but through stillness. And in that stillness, what once felt like suffering begins to feel like grace, because you're no longer resisting life. You're no longer demanding that it be different. You're simply being, awake, present, alive. Dick. And here's the most radical part. When you let go of desire, what remains isn't emptiness. It's love, not personal love, not romantic love, but a deep, impersonal compassion. A sense that everything is already okay, that nothing needs to be fixed, that even pain, when met without resistance, becomes sacred. This is the space the sages speak of, the space of non-duality, of freedom beyond form. And it's not a place you can reach. It's a place you remember, a place you return to when you stop chasing shadows and sit down inside yourself. So let me ask you something that goes deeper than any goal, deeper than any dream. Who are you when you stop needing anything to be different? Not forever. Just for now. Who are you without your story? Without your striving? Without your identity as the one who wants? That's not a question to answer with words. It's a doorway, and you cross that doorway not by doing more, but by doing less, by stopping, by surrendering, by listening to the silence that's been waiting for you beneath every desire you've ever had. This doesn't mean you stop acting. It means your action becomes free, not driven by craving, but by clarity. Not reactive, but responsive. You still live. You still create. You still love. But you don't need any of it to complete you, because you're already whole. And from that wholeness, you become truly powerful. Not the power of domination, but the power of presence. The power of someone who cannot be seduced by illusions, who cannot be manipulated by desire, who cannot be broken by loss, because they are rooted in something deeper than the will. That's what Schopenhauer glimpsed. That's what the Buddha taught. That's what the mystics lived. And that's what you right now are being invited into. Not later. Now, and when you forget, because you will come back. Come back to this breath. Come back to this stillness. Come back to the miracle of what is. And remember, you are not your desire. You are not your suffering. You are the awareness behind it all. And in that awareness, you are free.